Dispatchers help callers on the worst days of their lives. For over 25 years, we've been there. A silent partner in millions of calls thanks to our redundant and diverse networks that ensure call delivery. Today, cities are bigger, traffic more congested, and the challenge is more complex. But you're never alone, because InDigital is quietly improving, implementing, and driving the next generation of 911, so you're supported in every situation. Make the switch at indigital.net.
Have you ever met a 911 professional and asked, what's the worst call you've ever taken? Well, here's your answer. I heard your last breath the night you flipped your four-wheeler. I tried to call you the day you committed suicide by driving your car into a tree. Blue face, cold to the touch. I helped you with CPR after you found your infant face down, not breathing. It messed me up. I did everything I could, but it wasn't enough. You were with me from the beginning, Grandma. 27 years later, I took the 911 call when you died. How fitting to be there for me in the beginning, and I was there for you in the end. I miss you, Grandma. I am 911. This is but a glimpse into the world of emergency dispatch. But what is it really like to answer a call during someone's nightmare? What is the impact on the first responder answering the call? Available on Amazon or where you purchase your favorite books and ebooks. Imagine listening. Your worst day is our everyday.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
I think in some ways I feel like it's almost unpopular to say. In some ways it has changed me positively, but in some ways it has changed me negatively. Mm-hmm. And I would say both are true. I would say in positive ways, first off, it's made me much more aware of my own community, because I dispatch for where I live. I bought a house in the city where I live. So it's like part of my job is very personal. It's like, sorry, I'm choking up. This is my city, like my people. It's created a level of care and awareness of my community that I would say I did not have before this job.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode, whoa. I think I had a little bit too much caffeine. This episode is sponsored by InDigital, a leader next-gen core services, and a big shout out to subscribers as always. Thank you very much for everything, because I wouldn't be able to do what I do if it wasn't for all of you, but especially all of you who are here watching, listening, supporting, and sharing. Thank you so very much. And there's a lot of stuff going on. As usual, it is February 18th, 2025. There's so many episodes, so much excellent content that's going to be coming out. I am fresh back from the Be the Difference conference. Shout out to the Denise Emberly Foundation, as well as the Healthy Dispatcher, for hosting the podcast there at the conference. It was just a great experience. And if you've not been there, make sure to check them out. They are going to be in Knoxville, Tennessee. And it's going to be, I believe, January 24th through the 26th, something like that. Either way, for sure, it'll be that week, and it's going to be in Knoxville, Tennessee, and make sure to check them out. I had a phenomenal time there, and I look forward to going back. Again, so many things going on, but we're going to jump right in, and I'm excited to be here with my guest. My guest today is Rain, and she is an emergency communications officer and CTO out of the state of Virginia.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. No, this is good, and I'm sure the camera here just caught me mouthing bye to the other camera over here. People are probably going to see that and be like, "What? What is he doing?" just doing some behind the scenes stuff. But yes, I'm excited to be here with you and have you on. Now, you have let's see, you've got about 3 years, right? You've got 3 years going into public safety now?
Yep, just over 3 years. I had my 3 year in the beginning of December that just passed.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. And still early on in your career. And I bet,
Yes.
though, that there's a lot that has happened. Sometimes there's a lot that happens within even the first month that's going on. And you might start to wonder, like, what did I get myself into?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So how did you get into public safety to begin with?
So I think I got into public safety in kind of an unusual way
Hmm.
because it never occurred to me to have a career in public safety. I don't come from a public safety family. I don't come from a military family. So, really, public safety in any capacity was not at all on my radar for
Hmm.
something to do. How I started was so also too, if you think back, what was happening 3 years ago is basically the very beginnings, thick of it of COVID.
Hmm.
And so I was a manager at a retail grocery store. That was my job. And I was also going to college and I didn't really have any intention on leaving. I was happy where I was at. I was making decent money. And it was just one of those things where, if you're just scrolling on your phone and there's like just articles being suggested to you from like Google, there was an article for my city that was like the 911 center is critically understaffed to the point where sometimes 911 calls are going unanswered. And I saw that and I was like, I can apply for that job and see what happens. And I also kind of went into it a little bit carefree because I was like, I already have a good stable job. So if this doesn't work out, that's fine. I'm employed and it'll be okay. But that's where I applied. Is I just one off saw an article about the understaffment and I was like, maybe I can help with that.
You know, sometimes that's exactly how it happens. You just end up seeing something, or you're having a conversation with someone and they just say, "You know what? I think you would do great in in public safety or 911 or whichever." And it's awesome though that you read it and you just had kind of a feeling like that, motivation, inspiration, however you want to put it, of I think I could help with that. Like, they're so short staffed, I think I could potentially help with that. So you end up applying, but do
Mhm.
you get a chance to do a sit along or anything like that?
So I did a sit along. That was part of the application process, but it was pretty late in the process. I
Mhm.
believe, if I remember correctly, my sit along background was already going through. I'd already done a personal history statement. I'd already, was very committed into the application process before I did a sit along. So I did do one sit along during that time where I sat with the supervisor on duty, and he basically just also too, it was a lot of selling the position, like explaining the jobs, the hours, the pay, and things like that. But also sitting with him while he's working a radio and answering 911 calls and things like that. So I did have one opportunity to do a sit along.
So, with all of that stuff that was going on too, was there a lot of calls coming in? Were there any high profile stuff? And the reason I ask really quick before you answer is because I remember that we would have people come in, whether it was like a citizens academy or someone who wanted to apply for the job, and we would have people sit in before going any further. And sometimes there would be nothing going on, and we would sit there and think, no, 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 this is not a true depiction of what goes on here. And sometimes we would have people sitting there going, this seems pretty easy. I think I could do this. And then of course, someone might also even say, it is pretty quiet in here. And we're like, no, you said the Q word, and then everything
Mhm.
goes to hell. So what was it like for you?
So I'd say with that particular sit along, nothing extreme was going on in that moment. They were getting some calls. It was during a regular daylight shift. I would say like early afternoon time
Mhm.
was when it was happening, but it was a lot of what at least I would call now like routine emergencies, like car accidents without injuries, lower priority medical calls, things of that nature, but nothing extreme, which I've now handled and aware of at this time. But yeah, nothing like that, at least at my salon.
So then even with just that was going on, then did you kind of feel already like I think this is where I'm supposed to be? Like, and the reason I ask too is because there are some folks that will go in just for the sit along, or they're just, I don't know, finding out other things, maybe even doing a tour, and they feel it almost immediately. A lot of people say that 911 gets into your blood really fast.
That time, I can't necessarily say that I was sure one way or another that I
Mhm.
like truly belonged there or that was even my calling, but
Yeah.
I definitely wasn't deterred or had like a negative impression from what I saw or thought that I couldn't do it. I will say, even at that time, I was not yet aware of how much work 911 dispatchers do to de-escalate situations and provide life-saving instructions and things like that before responders get there. I would say in the application process, I was still very ignorant of that part of the job.
It's interesting a lot of times because, people will see or watch rather whatever's on TV or movies like that one Halle Berry movie, The Call.
Yep.
And then people, even now, people will still say, "Is it like that movie?" You're like, "No, it's not."
No.
Like the dramatic pieces of it, I
Yes.
think those pieces, even though it's over dramatized, like, I mean, you have to do that in a movie or a show to try to portray what that drama is like. So, that, I can kind of get, but no, we're not driving out somewhere to yeah, we wish we could, right? Like we wish
Yes.
we could, reach out to someone and, hug them or whatever, but it's not like that. So it's weird sometimes coming in when you don't know, because you don't know what you don't know. And like you were saying, you were just kind of, you just thought what you thought, and then you get
Mhm.
in and then you start seeing it and your eyes are like like
Yeah,
what?
like, I had no idea that, like, 911 dispatchers gave CPR instructions over the phone or could give instructions for someone that's in a sinking vehicle. Like, I had no idea.
So you end up going through the process. You do your sit along, which you said was kind of late into that process and all. And then you find out that you got the job.
Yes.
What is that like for you? Like, are you overwhelmed? Are you anxious? Are you like, am I going to be able to do this? Or what was that like?
I would say I was very excited, but I was also nervous because, like I said, I had a decent job before that, and I was leaving that job to pursue an unknown where also statistically a lot of people don't make it through training. And I felt like I don't want to say self-deprecating, but I feel like I don't think I'm a more special person than anybody else. So
Mhm.
when I walked into training, I felt like I had a great shot to make it, but I felt like I also had a great shot where maybe I wouldn't, because a lot of people don't. And that was a little unnerving to think of, like, I could do my absolute best, try my absolute hardest, and still not make it through. Or even if I do make it through, find out that maybe I'm not suited for the position, that maybe this isn't something that I'm suited to do just personally, and I don't like it as much as I thought I would like it.
Very true. Yes. No, that does happen. It's one or the other.
Yes.
And sometimes early on people do realize, they might get through all of, the testing, all of the
Mhm.
geography, all of the memorization of codes,
Mhm.
whichever, but all it takes is that first 911 call. And
Yeah.
I remember a lot of people that I helped train as well. We had a group of about 10 or 11, and only two of them made it. And
Mhm.
I remember one guy, he took that first call and he goes, "You know what? This is not this is not for me." And he was a brother of one of our, I believe, sergeants or detectives, something like that. And he really wanted to get into it. He was also doing corrections, but then all it took was that first call, and he just goes, "Nope, I'm out."
And I feel like something like that too is incredibly hard, of when that's something you wanted to do and you had a
Mhm.
lot of hopes and dreams invested into that position, and then to realize it's not for you.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, at least for me, I didn't have a lot of preconceived notions. I was kind of open to how it was going to go, no matter how it was going to go. So I didn't have a lot of hopes and dreams like built up into, this is something I wanted to do so long since I was a child or something.
Right, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, exactly. So what about when you had first, I mean, this kind of goes along with the sit along and all of this, but when you first walk into the center and you see everything,
Mhm.
if you like, it's been 3 years, so,
Yes.
so some people I've talked to, there's like, "I've been in this for 30 years, I don't remember what it was like back then," but for you, when you first walked in and you're seeing everything so that people who are watching and listening can get kind of a picture of what you were experiencing. What are you seeing? Are there multiple people on the floor at a time? Are you hearing,
Yes.
tones going off? Are you hearing people talking? And at the same time, how is that making you feel?
So our center is laid out where it's kind of like a semicircle of consoles with the
Mhm.
supervisor at like a front console. So they're looking out over the semicircle.
Yeah.
And so counting that supervisor console, we have 7 consoles on the floor. Now that doesn't mean that we have 7 dispatchers and operators all at the same time, but we have the opportunity to do so. When I went there, what was typically on a shift was you had the one supervisor and 3 dispatchers, where each of them was working a radio, each of the dispatchers, and also answering the phones. And that was like the set minimum. Now, since some time has passed, we have a little bit more staff, so a little bit more consoles are full. But at the time, that's what I walked into. And at that time, we had 4 monitor screens. Now we have 5, which we were very happy about. We very pushed for that additional
Oh,
screen.
that's awesome then.
Yeah, so we were very excited to have that. But at the time when I first started, we had 4. And even that was a lot to look at. Like, that wasn't something that occurred to me that I would be looking at really any more than 2 screens. It didn't occur to me with how our center does it, where you're answering radio traffic and talking on the phone at the same time. That did not occur to me that that would be something that we're doing. Also, with how our room is set up with that semicircle, we do work off of each other a lot. So if someone, let's say, is taking like a really high priority like police call and they're on the phone, they can like turn around or yell to the police dispatcher information or clarifications or things like that too. So even though a lot of information is obviously going in the notes, so responders and everybody going is seeing it, we also work off of each other in the room a lot, just turning around, yelling stuff to each other. And you're hearing all of the radios also through the speakers, in addition to your own radio traffic that you're hearing in your ears. So it's a ton of auditory stimulation all at once, between you talking to your callers, you talking to your responders on the radio, you hearing all the other responders on the radio, you talking to your coworkers, your supervisor might be talking to you. There's a lot of talking.
You just took me back because the way you're talking, you're pretty much set up the way my last center was. It was the center that I finished off my career in. We had 5 consoles, and, the 5th one, it was basically set up the same way. Like, you walk in, and, like, immediately to the right, up front, is the supervisor console, and then there's the 2 on either side. And but we had 3 minimum, and
Okay.
that's counting the supervisor. So
Oh, wow.
usually nobody would use that top one unless there was, I don't know, a big thing that was going on that we were all in there for, and there was more people. But it was pretty much the same thing, where when you're on phones, you're not just on phones, you're on radios with fire and EMS, and you're
Mm-hmm.
doing everything at once, and you're triaging all of the calls. And you might have a partner to your left. Usually it was only like that on the weekends, or again, if it's like bad weather or anything like that that's going on. But it would usually just be you, and then you would have someone on the other side doing backup phones and backup radios, and then the one person who's doing the main radio piece. And that was something that I had to get used to as well, because when I first started out, I was at a one person dispatch center, but for a PD, for a police department. Now I'm working with a team, and you're trying to figure all that out. So you telling me all of this, I'm picturing your center, but I'm also picturing mine at the same time, because it's pretty much the same. And yelling things over, is it's, and sometimes too, like for those who are watching and listening who've never experienced this before, sometimes we wouldn't be just yelling stuff over. We would be saying certain things at a higher volume so that the person on the radio knows what's going on. Or, and I'm sure you've done this as well, you listen for how hard someone is typing their keys. And when you hear that, shit's going down.
Or even you repeat what the caller's saying to you.
Yes.
You're like, who stabbed who, where? And then like
Right.
the whole room like knows to be ready for what's coming next.
Yes.
So,
Oh man. Yeah, you're taking me back. So so with the setup that's there, are you 8-hour shifts or 12-hour?
So currently we are technically 8.5-hour shifts. And we
Oh.
were, yeah, the half hour is our like roll call time where we like gather information,
Oh,
or if we
okay,
have
that
like a
makes sense.
training or something that we need to go over real quick or
Mhm.
something like that. And then so we're physical room time is 8 hours. And so then we work on a 5-day on, 2-day off, 5-day on, 3-day off schedule, because that extra half hour gives us that third day every other week, and that's our rotation. However, we pushed very hard for 12-hour shifts. We very much wanted 12-hour shifts almost entirely collectively as a center. So we are going to be going to 12-hour shifts at the end of March.
Oh
Which
man.
we're excited about.
Hey, well, so when I was in dispatch at the last center and we were doing 12 hours as well, um mine was 4:30 to 4:30. So I don't know how you will end up doing it, but mine was 4:30 to 4:30, 4:30 in the evening, or I guess afternoon going into the evening to 4:30 in the morning. And we would have people come in like a quarter after 4 to do our own briefing and such, and then we take over unless we're working a big call. And a lot of times, and I'm sure you've experienced this already as well, that when you start that call, it's like, this is my call, like I'm gonna finish it, I'm gonna see it through, and and then you go from there. So it's an interesting profession, but
Yes.
I love it. So for you, you're going in and you see all of this stuff, you're hearing all of these things, and like you said, very stimulating, overstimulating
Yes.
with the
Yes.
amount of everything that's going on.
Mhm.
Did you have those moments early on? Like I'm sure a lot of us have, where you're just like, am I going to be able to do this? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. Because what also gives me a good perspective now as a CTO, with part of it also still being so new myself, is I
Mhm.
still very vividly remember starting out. Whereas I feel like, time goes on, experience goes on, you might kind of forget, or at least maybe you forget how you felt.
Yeah.
And so I very vividly remember looking at all of that. And then once I was hired, once I was in training and just sitting with other dispatchers, listening and watching what they were doing, it just looks like magic. Because especially too, when you have not really a big idea of what exactly you're looking at, and you're looking at these 4 to 5 different screens, everything they're actioning in CAD, they're talking to their caller, they're talking to the responders all at the same time, they're actioning both of those things congruently. It looks like magic is really what it looks like. And so I remember looking at that and being like, how am I going to be able to replicate what they're doing?
Right.
So, yeah.
It's funny that you say it's like magic, because when I was in dispatch, our team, my supervisor at the time, I wasn't a supervisor yet, but she she used to say this, and our whole team started saying it. But the officers would say, I don't know how you guys do this. And she would say, well, it's FM. And they'd go, what? And she'd go, "It's FM," and then, like, all of us started saying it's FM, and they couldn't figure it out, and finally, we told one of them, and then it started to spread, but we go, "It's fucking magic." Like, that's how we do it, it's FM, so
Mhm.
so whenever they would ask and we would say it, they would be like, "Okay, well, I get it now." So you're getting in there, and you start your training and all, you know, as you're going through your training, you learn the geography, and actually, really quick, just a quick overview. how does your training work? Are there different phases? Because like for my training, we had 4 different phases. And
Mhm.
that 4th one was that shadow phase where, you're doing everything yourself, you're working with the team, and your trainer's like on the other side. You're no longer on like this umbilical cord type, while people are listening. It's all you. So how did your process work?
So our training works to be considered autonomous, signed off from training. Everybody learns to do everything. Like we don't
Mhm.
have people that are only trained for call taking and never work a radio. Like everybody is trained for everything. And so we start with call taking, and that's its own phase. And then you go through that. And when it's decided that you're proficient with your call taking, you move on to, we have fire EMS radio. So you
Mhm.
move on to that. And then we have 2 PD radios. We call it just PD1, PD2. You start with PD2. I like to call that the numbers and letters radio because for our PD2, that's basically where we run everybody. That's where we do the OLs, the warrants, any extra requests by officers, things like that is all done on that radio. We also dispatch animal wardens on that radio, but our animal wardens have pretty limited working hours. So depending on your shift, there might not be any animal wardens on your shift. And
Oh.
then our PD1 radio, that is our main dispatch radio. And that is the last thing that you learn. And that has, the critical incidents, the most intense traffic, things go from 0 to 100 in 0.2 seconds. And yeah, so once you go through all those stages and you're signed off from each stage, that's when you're considered a fully fledged dispatcher at our agency. Also, with the state of Virginia, there is a dispatch academy through the police department that everybody goes to be a dispatcher in Virginia. It's about a week and a half, and that's where you're signed off by the state. And then after that is your floor training, where your trainer then submits with the state that you've met certain floor metrics that the state requires. And then that's when you're like truly certified. You're like certified with your agency and certified with the state.
Oh,
So,
man.
yeah.
Definitely a process.
Yes. Yeah. I personally was in training when I was in training. I started February and I was finished by the very beginning of August of that same year was my training period.
Oh, damn.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely so just kind of in comparison, my training, well, okay. So when I very first started out in Florida at that's single seat PD, I went in the first night, and like the chief of police showed up to my house and asked me if I wanted the job still, and I said yes, and he goes, "Okay, well you start tonight." And I said, "Okay." And this is 2001. I
Mm-hmm.
go in that night. My trainer shows me things for about 20-25 minutes. He takes a 911 call. When he's done, I literally applauded him and said, "Good job." And then he said, "You're next." And I thought, "What?" So that was my initiation, my getting thrown to the wolves. And then when I was at the dispatch center, the central dispatch in Michigan, for the central dispatch, the training, I only had about 3 or 4 months, maybe. But because I came with like 4 years of experience, they're like, we can kind of push him through a little bit." But dude, it was it was pretty crazy. So,
Yeah. Agency
um,
to agency is so different.
yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everyone's training is different, and if you've got training already from a different place, it goes a little faster sometimes, but oh man, yeah, that is definitely a different beast. And you are going in on, like we were saying, 3 years, and I feel like, and maybe you feel like this as well, but a lot of people have said too that the 2.5, maybe 3 years is kind of the sweet spot where you feel that you're dialed in, because you can be confident, right? And you can have all of the training right off the bat in the beginning, but I feel like it takes, up to, the 3-year mark or so to really feel like you're dialed in.
I would say that I feel about the same way. I would say after about my 2-year mark, I felt pretty confident with the fact of no matter what they give me over the radio, no matter what happens when I answer that phone, I'm like, I got it. I'm like, I will know what to do. Like, even if I haven't done it before, I will know what to do. So, and I mean, not saying that something won't come out there and maybe throw me for a loop. I don't know.
Oh,
Cause
for
I
sure.
mean, you know better than anyone who knows what's going to happen. But I would say I still feel that way today. And actually right now at my agency, I am an acting supervisor. So sometimes it is really up to me, my coworkers, like, I don't know what to do, and it's up to me to decide what needs to be done. So
Right. And that adding that piece to it as well. Now when you're getting to that spot, I think one of the hard things was it took me about 2 years, I think, maybe before I finally said, okay, yeah, I'm going to go out for supervisor. Cause I had so many friends and people that I worked with saying, you need to do it. You'd make a great supervisor. Well, then you end up getting to that side, and then those same friends are like, all right, like we're gonna run this joint. And then since you're the one who's the supervisor, you gotta say, well,
mhm.
there's a difference now. And they're like, well, you're dead to us. Not for real, but it's that line that you end up walking where it's
Mhm.
friend, coworker, and you being the one who's in charge, because you're the one who's ultimately going to be the one making the decisions. But the way I was doing it was we did it as a team. So if someone had a better idea in those split seconds that we have, then let's go for it. Because
Mhm.
like I said, even though I'm the one making the ultimate decision, I would rather it be um like a team effort for all of it. Now,
Absolutely.
do you do you remember some of your very first 911 call, or some of those earlier calls that you were taking?
So I don't remember my actual first 911 call, but
Mhm.
and so also how we do our call taking structure, learning how to take calls is we also answer the non-emergency, we call them admin calls.
Yeah.
And so you do that for a couple of days, and if you're getting proficient with that, then you move on to 911. So I don't remember if I'd already been taking 911 calls yet when I took this call, but I'd
Mhm.
say the first call that I actually took that was some sort of crime, I would say, would be I took a call where an individual was reporting that he went to a massage place to try to receive a massage and was offered much more than just the massage. And that is what he was trying to report to us. So,
Oh,
yes.
okay. Well, that is a welcome to dispatch as well type call, because
Yes.
that
And my trainer, they listen with your calls when you're brand new like that. And so she's listening to this call, standing right behind me, like watching me, kind of looking at me like, well, what are you going to do, Rain? What are you going to say to this man? So,
that is oh man, yeah, those are interesting ones that come in, because yeah, especially when you're new and your trainer is there, and they're just kind of looking at you like, now what? and and you want to do a good job, right?
yeah.
Like, because you're there, you want to do a good job.
Mhm.
So you kind of look at your trainer, for a moment, like, what do I say? Like, what? How do you? I think that's one of the things about this profession too, is you learn how to wordsmith. Like, you learn how to really talk, and um sometimes get out of certain things, when you're talking to people. And I remember a time when I was in training, there was a guy who called in. He was a truck driver. He was at a rest area. And when he called, he was in a lot of pain. And, I asked what happened. Of course, we've got location, all the other stuff that we need. And I don't know how he did it. He said he was in a hurry. And maybe that's why I now just take my time, even if I'm in a hurry, because he zipped up his lower portions into the zipper, and he was in pain. And I said, okay, we're gonna get somebody out there to you. And I put him on hold, and my trainer just kind of looks at me, and I said to her, what do I even say? Like, how do I even put that out over the radio? And she goes, just say penis problems, uh, having penis problems. And I said, okay. I said, doo doo doo, Elegant Central 2, and start going through my whole thing, and in reference to penis problems, unkey. And I turn and I look at my trainer, and her jaw is dropped. And just like that, exactly the way you did it just now. And I said, what? And she goes, I can't believe you said that. And I said, you told me to. You're my trainer.
Yes. There is, especially with like that trainee trainer relationship, there is a lot of blind trust for sure. And like
Oh yeah.
trainers need to remember too, because even one of my trainees, she just completed the process. I just signed her off less than a month ago.
Mhm.
And that's very much how that relationships works, is anything I would have told her to do, she would have done it, which is how it should be. But
Right. Yes. So yeah, I end up going through the call and everything ends up being fine. But that one I won't forget. I remember looking at her afterwards and I said, you better not mark me down on my DOR, like on my
you told me.
paperwork. Yeah, because you're the one who told me. And if we get in trouble for it, you told me. You're going down with me. And we were laughing about it, but oh man, I
The
started freaking
FCC's
out.
coming.
Yes. So for you and that call, um what was the outcome? Like,
I
did
got
an
him in
officer
touch.
go out?
I got him in touch with an officer by
Mhm.
phone, so I had an officer call him, but I don't know the outcome of the call, as we usually don't.
Oh,
But
true. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And you know what? Maybe that's one that you don't want to know because that's a different kind of happy ending. Anyway, so this it's so crazy. I mean, there's a lot of times, people they'll talk or they'll ask, like even now, like earlier, I went and got my haircut finally. It had been a couple of months and it was just super growing out. And I went in and the guy goes, so what are you doing today? And I said, well, I'm actually going to be recording a couple episodes of this podcast that I do. So he's asking me all of these questions and asking questions about, dispatchers calls that I had taken. And I'm telling him some of the funny stuff. And he's just kind of looking like, for real? And I'm like, yeah, like that stuff actually happens. Like there's moments, especially like with your call that you just talked about, that you think sometimes, is this real life? And
Yes.
it definitely is. Yeah, it's definitely real life. So, you mentioned that you're and I said in the beginning as well that you're a CTO too. So
Mhm.
this
Yes.
is excellent. Well, CTO as well is what I mean. For anybody who's listening who's probably thinking, there's a CTO too? Like, no, I don't mean a CTO number two, a CTO as well.
Yes.
So I do have to ask because you're 3 years in, you're training other people and all. Was there something that because usually it's one of two things
Mhm.
when people decide that they want to be a CTO or they want to be a supervisor or whichever. One, they had crap training and they wanted to become a trainer themselves because they don't want that literal next generation of 911 coming in and having to deal with what they had to deal with. So they want to make a change, right? Or they had great training and it inspired them that that's the kind of cycle that they want to continue with, again, that next generation of 911 coming in, where you can kind of mold them that way and just have them experience like the good stuff that you experienced as well. So for you, especially in the beginning, how you talked about, you just kind of saw it in the newspaper, right? And you got
Mhm.
into it and now you're training others as well. What was that inspiration to also become a trainer?
So I was approached by my supervisor asking me if I was interested in training.
Hmm.
And at first that was my first thought, was I was like, I'm really new. I'm like, what am I going to offer someone else? I'm like, I feel like I barely know how to do my job, honestly, at the time when he was asked. But I thought about it and I told him, I was like, sure. I was like, I can train. And I was inspired by that. I had two different trainers during my training, and we had really great relationships. I felt like they were excellent trainers. And with me training, what I really wanted to do was also mimic that, because I thought they were such good trainers. But also I felt like, I'm like, here's an agency, especially at that time, that's really hurting for staffing, that's really hurting for trained dispatchers.
Hmm.
And these two people took time to train someone. And especially too, but until I was a trainer, I again did not understand the time and effort that goes into training a person. But I was like, I know they put in a lot of effort and a lot of care to make sure that I was trained. I was like, I can do that for someone else. And so that was my thought of becoming a trainer, is just paying that back of what was already invested in me.
Ah, I love that. That is very cool. And just listening to the way you talk about it and all, like I can tell this is something that you really do love to do. I mean, did you just thinking about it right now and everything that you've said so far and what it was like in the beginning, I mean, did you even picture even 3 years in and being a CTO and kind of, supervising as well? Did you ever think that it was gonna be like this?
No, I I never thought it would be like this. Like I said, I never thought about getting into this field. I never thought that even when I was out of training and just being a dispatcher, on my own, on my shift, I didn't think that I would end up getting as involved in my center in the city and things like that as much as I've had in this short amount of time. So
And now you're in it to win it, and
yes,
you're
yeah,
doing it.
I'm very in it now. That's what I've told some of my coworkers, is I'm in it now.
Well, what about, just kind of thinking about, friends and family or whichever, what are some of their thoughts? Because I remember when I started in this profession, some of my family members or even friends would go, "Dude, like, what do you how can you do that? Like, what how can you listen to all of these different things?" And, they would sometimes ask me too, like, "Are you taking, like, real crazy stuff?" And I would say, "Did you see that one thing in the news?" Like, "Yeah. Yeah, that was my call. Like, I took that call." So, the way the news said it, there's some different parts there that go deeper, and I'm not gonna share that with you because I was having nightmares from the stuff I heard as well, but, you just do it. I mean, you're there to help people and I enjoy it. So for like for you, friends or family or anything, have there been some of those conversations where it's like, how are you doing this?
So when I was applying for the position, something that I thought was very fortuitous in a good way was when I was telling people, like my family and stuff, that I had applied for this job, almost everybody's first reaction was like, "Oh, I think you'd be really good at that." And so I felt I felt like that was very reassuring, because I
Yeah,
was very on the fence of if this would be something that I'd be good at. I was like, well, that bodes well that a lot of people think this is something I could or should be doing.
right.
But since having the job, I will say that I haven't quite, and I don't know if this is still because I'm so new, I haven't quite found a good balance with my work life and my personal life yet,
Mhm.
because like I said, like no one in my family does this type of job or is in a similar field, or even what I call like a helping field. Like I don't have nurses in my family or things like that. And so I don't really talk about my job with my family or anything like that. Every so often, especially if a big noteworthy call or something is big in the news for my city, like I might say something like, "Oh, I helped manage that incident," and that's kind of as deep as that conversation will go. But on the flip side, I will say too, my family hasn't really asked me much about it, besides how people just talk about any other job of like, "Oh, how is work?" And a lot of the things that I will usually talk about will be more on the administrative end and
Yeah.
not the call end. So, like, even how we're going to 12s at the end of March, like, I've talked about that a lot, of, the process of getting that organized and us voting for it. And I'll talk a lot about that, but not a lot about the nitty gritty of the job.
I would say that it probably is, that you've got it's early on. Some
Hmm.
people might think, well, you're 3 years in. Like, well, that's pretty. That's early on still. To new, especially in public safety, because there are
Yes.
so many different things that you may or may not experience. And I was kind of the same way for a long time, trying to figure out that work life balance that we all need because you know, th a lot of times, I'll just say this, my family, like, I would get invited, like, my immediate family, we would get invited to birthday parties, to, like, all this
Hmm.
other stuff, but because I was working so much, eventually, it kinda stopped, and I
Hmm.
reached out, I was like, I just saw this on social media. Why didn't you guys say something? They're like, well, you're always working and we didn't want to bother you. I'm like, no, please ask me still. Because I was actually off during that time.
Yeah, and it's
So
still nice to be asked. Even if you
right.
can't
Yeah.
come, it's still nice to be asked.
Yes, after that time, they still asked afterwards, and I was like, "Okay, good, we're good." But for them, it's like we didn't want to bother you. I'm like, "No, you're not bothering me. Believe me, it's I would rather you ask and stuff because there's sometimes where you're going through all of this different stuff and you don't know who to talk to. So that would be one thing that I would say as well. 3 years in, and trying to figure out that work life balance and everything, never try to keep your identity outside of 911 as well, to be able to keep that going. But also, if you ever need to talk, do not be afraid to talk to people about what it is that you do, most importantly why you do it. Um i i will say, like, for me, for a long time I buried my calls. I didn't talk about it. And what I realized was, I was basically screwing myself, because I was also one of those people that was like, I leave it at work, which is bullshit,
Mm.
because
Yeah.
I'm actually coming home and, everything is going on and I'm just kind of there. I'm there, but I'm not fully there because there was so much other stuff that I had to figure out on my own. And sometimes we don't want to admit that it's us with certain things, right? Sometimes we get in our own way, and you have to do, some soul searching. And even if you're just journaling, even if you're just writing down certain things, that is therapeutic as well. So just a little advice, something to take
No,
with you.
absolutely. I think, especially too, three years in, I think I've been in the stage where I've been trying to figure out where I fit into 911.
Yeah.
And I feel like I fit now. Like I have coworkers, I have responsibilities, I have things that I'm working on within the center, even extra to my normal job duties. And I fit now. I have a spot, and I feel like I can solidly say that. And so now I need to think about the reverse of, okay, now where does 911 fit with me?
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah. And
mhm.
it's definitely a journey, for this whole profession. Like, there's a lot of people, I've got friends who have retired out after like 20, 25 years. They end up, going through their whole time that they
Mhm.
needed to. And they too were like, I don't take it home, I put it on the shelf and everything. But then they end up reaching out later on to say, you know what, it all came back. And I really wish that I was talking about it more early on so that I can deal with it now. Like, they're getting the
Mhm.
help that they need, but when they got out, they almost had a kind of imposter syndrome where, because they're not in 911 anymore, they didn't feel like they could reach out to their 911 friends. and
Mhm.
and it's the complete opposite. Like, people are like, no, reach out, like, you're still, you're still part of us. I always tell people, forever gold. Like, you're always, once dispatch, always dispatch. So
Yes.
yeah, those are just some things to think about. But I get that, exactly what you're saying, that now that you have this piece figured out, now you got to figure out the other piece. And it's a good thing to be thinking about now versus later on, when you're like, who am I? Like,
Yes. Yeah.
what am I doing?
I don't want to have to be 10 years in and having to re-find myself. So,
Right, yeah, because there are some folks who've told me, they're like, "I had to learn how to feel again, because
mhm.
I had put so much into the folks that were calling in that I didn't know how to feel for myself."
Mhm.
And man, that is something. So yeah, just things to think about. But you're doing some amazing things already, just everything that you're talking about it, and moving up, and your reasons why. And that is amazing. um if you feel comfortable, um is there a call that, and I know it's hard to just pick one, because there's a lot of different calls, right, that we take and all. But a call that kind of sticks with you.
I probably will never forget. Probably no matter how long I'm there. I would say I was definitely under 2 years there when this call happened. And I was working fire EMS dispatch and also call taking.
Mm-hmm.
And we had, I would say a call, but it wasn't a call because it happened in a very public place. So our center was overwhelmed with calls where a little boy was run over by a vehicle, and his injuries were so severe that the callers were telling us that there was brain matter on the ground. And like I said, I was still very new. So I'm taking these calls, and I'm also sending everybody that I think is appropriate to send for the fire department, given the situation. And it was a very evolving, chaotic event where, because it was so public, people were breaking out and fighting. People that were on scene, like bystanders, were getting physically sick from what they were witnessing. So we were sending a lot of resources for that call. And I will say our agency and the police and fire department, everything like that, did a really good job and had a debriefing regarding that event in the appropriate amount of time, like a couple days after the initial event occurred. But I would say that event is what happened to me after the event is I was in a store, I would say maybe a week after that event.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a little girl, she's probably like 2, in the front of the store, and she was unattended. There was no adult near this little girl. And so I'm just kind of like in the front of the store, like minding my own business, but also like watching her and like looking around. And this was also near where the checkouts and stuff are. And I mean, it's so easy as a parent, you turn around to go pay and your little toddler just darts off from you. So I'm like, someone will see her in like 2 or 3 seconds. Her parent will, snatch her back up. And I'm just looking around and no one is coming for this little girl. And then it's a store that has automatic doors. And then she just darts from the store into the sidewalk, into the street. And I run after her and I snatch her up from the sidewalk right before she steps into the road. And I go back into the store and I'm holding this stranger's child. And I'm like looking around like where, like now a lot of time has passed where she's almost run into the street. And I'm looking around like, where is this person's child? Like this child's parent. And then finally a woman approaches me and she's like laughing and smiling. And clearly the child also recognizes her. So I give the child back to the adult and that's the end of it. But I could like feel it like inside, like I was so upset in a way that I wouldn't normally be upset, even by just that level of carelessness. Like that's not something that would normally upset me. And it took me a little bit to piece together that I was so viscerally upset by that situation because of what happened to the little boy like a week before. So, and that's when I realized that I wasn't leaving all my calls at work and it was coming home with me sometimes.
Yeah. Was there a debriefing or anything like that after this call?
Yeah, so there was actually, I will say, in my opinion, I feel like our public safety handled that event very well with the resources that were offered afterwards. There was a diffusing that day of the event, and dispatch was invited to that. And I will say a couple people on my shift went. I did not go because at that time I wanted everything to feel normal. Mm-hmm. And so they actually called in the shift that was coming in after us early to relieve us, to anybody that wanted to go to the diffusing. So I had plenty of opportunity to go, but I didn't want to go. I just wanted to stay at my console and take my calls and everything be normal, because it's normal to keep going to work and then finish at my scheduled time and go home. And that's what's normal.
Yeah.
And so I didn't go, and I can't say that I do or don't regret not going, but that's the reason why I didn't go. I just wanted things to feel very normal, even in a situation that was not normal. And then, like I said, a day or two after that is when the formal debriefing happened. And because it was such a large public event with so many people involved, there was a ton of people at this debriefing. I want to say maybe 30 responders, like counting dispatch at this debriefing. And so it was it was a very positive experience to have the debriefing, and I'm glad that we did. And that's part of what stemmed me, at least piqued my interest into joining our peer support team, which I am now on now, but at the time I was not. But that is what kind of sparked my interest, is seeing that process. So
See, that's pretty awesome then that there was even with everything that happened, that it pushed you to want to be on the peer support team as well. And I
mhm.
think this also helps um because as CTO going into, potentially being a supervisor as well, and being on this peer support team, anyone else who comes in who might have a call that's similar, or even a call with, kids or something,
Mhm.
you will have that story to be able to share with them, in the sense that I know what it's like as well. Because, sometimes and just even with everything that I do with Imagine Listening, with the I Am 911 movement, and people sharing all of these stories, the biggest thing that people have said, and some still do sometimes, is I thought I was the only one dealing with stuff like this. I thought that I was alone. I have felt alone. And now that I've read these stories, now that I've heard these other folks sharing on the show and stuff, I know that I'm not alone. And for you specifically, anyone else coming in, you will always have this and any other experience to say, I know what you're going through. And it's okay to feel, however it is that you're feeling, because I was there too. And if you have any questions, let me know. And I love that I mean, just again, it's crazy that just out of nowhere, you see this advertisement and you're quickly going through, your training, your experiences, what the first call that you had, and then moving on to this call that, you're saying that you'll never forget, and that you've it sounds like you've worked through. And
Yeah.
now you're on the peer support team as well. And it's leading to bigger things, in the sense that, as you kept saying as well earlier, you're giving back, you're kind of paying it forward for a lot of things, but especially those that are coming in after you, you'll be able to help them.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that is something too that I try to be very transparent about, like with just our new staff in general, whether or not I'm their trainer or not, or even whether or not that they're on my shift, is just because I remember it so vividly of just how I felt being new, starting out, seeing all these things, and some of these calls, and that it's okay to have feelings about your calls. Because that was something too with that incident that I just spoke about, is I will say, at the time after it happened, I didn't seek help or anything like that right away. And part of the reason why I didn't is because I felt like I was too new. Like I felt like I was too new to have pain or have feelings. And it's like, oh, well, there's people that have been here 20 years, and what have they must have seen and done so much. Like, how should I feel any type of way about anything? And that's something that I've really tried, because I felt that way at that time, to express to other new people, like, that's not the case. Like, anything can happen at any time. And even calls that seem innocuous at first can have staying power. And it's okay to get resources for those types of things.
For sure. Yeah, no, I fully agree. And it has been a pleasure to have you on, and to talk to you, and to learn more about you. I've got a couple questions here as we go into the wrap up of this, but this first one, I mean, it kind of you kind of answered it already a little bit, telling the story that you just shared, with having the kid running out into the road and you pulling him back. The question was going to be, how do you feel like this profession has changed you?
um I think in some ways feel like it's almost unpopular to say. In some ways it has changed me positively, but in some ways it has changed me negatively.
Mhm.
And I would say both are true. I would say in positive ways. First off, it's made me much more aware of my own community because I dispatch for where I live. I bought a house in the city where I live. So it's like part of my job is very personal. It's like, these are, sorry, I'm choking up. This is my city, like my people. It's created a level of care and awareness of my community that I would say I did not have before this job. I would say some of the negative changes, I've noticed I'm much more impatient. And I think some of that comes from doing so many things at once all the time in succession, moving very quickly, or I hate to say it because it sounds so rude, but when people drown on with stories and will not get to the point, like I want to use my call taker techniques to like refocus them, to like come back, tell me exactly what happened, and just refocus them with the story. So that's something in my personal life that I try to be aware of, that's not how normal interaction goes. You don't refocus people from their very, very long stories. So.
Right. Yes. And yeah, and for those who are watching and listening that might feel kind of how you said that it might sound rude or whatever. No, there are moments where people are calling in and they're like, well, let me start in the beginning. And you're like, ooh, hold on. Like, hold on a minute. Like, actually, I need you to give me the main point so that we can get help out to you as fast as possible. So where some of you, who are watching and listening, who have never been in this profession before, some of you who might think that's a rude thing that we're stopping you from telling the entire story and side details and paths and, added Easter eggs. we just need that information as fast as possible. But you're right, in the life outside of dispatch, that is something that ends up being where we have to kind of retrain our brain, right? And it happens, and it's okay. So I feel you, and on a lot of how some of the things have changed. Now, the last question that I have for you is, and even 3 years in, especially the way you landed in public safety, if you could go back in time to talk to yourself 3 years ago, when you're looking at that newspaper and you're like, I could do that. I could help out. What would you tell yourself? And this is not to change anything, right? Because I feel like there are some things that we experience that bring us to where we are at today, whether it be hard lessons, good lessons, easy lessons, whichever. A lot of times it's the harder ones, right? But if you could go back in time to talk to yourself, to give yourself some advice, what would you tell yourself?
I don't really know if I would necessarily give advice just because I am pretty pleased with how things have gone. I don't know if things could have gone a different way.
Yeah.
However, I would probably try to alleviate some of my worries at the time of whether it all was going to work out or anything like that. And I'd probably tell myself, you're going to save a lot of lives. That's probably what I would say.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so very much for being on. And if you haven't heard it lately, thank you for what you do. Thank you for what you do in this profession. And because I know I was the same way. We don't, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who are like this too. We don't always need a thank you, but sometimes a thank you is accepted and it is nice. So again, thank you for what you do in this profession and for coming on and sharing your story. It has been amazing. Thank you so very much. So I will be right back here with you in just one moment. And for those who are watching and listening, if you have any comments, questions, or you ever want to be a guest on the show, you can email us. And that's going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. And the easiest way to find everything, however, is to simply go to links.co/WTT podcast. And that's links with 2 i's.co/WTT podcast. You'll find everything there. Email, social media, where to follow, where to listen to the latest episode, where to purchase Imagine Listening Volume 1 and Volume 2, and where to join the community Everything is right there. Again, it's links.co/WTT podcast. This broadcast has been sponsored by InDigital, a leader next gen core services. Shout out to subscribers as always. Thank you very, very much. And this can be seen on Facebook, YouTube, as well as X and LinkedIn Live. There's clips on Instagram as well as TikTok. So make sure to follow and check us out everywhere there. And then you can listen to the episodes 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone. And we will see you all in the next one.
Imagine listening to someone's worst day every single day. Imagine listening as someone experiences life through their worst nightmare to the miracle of birth or a life saved. I'm Ricardo Martinez, a former 911 dispatcher, and for years, I've been recording the voices of a hidden world, ours. I've provided a space for 911 dispatchers to share their powerful stories. It started as a peer support session and continues. Dispatchers sitting together, sharing out loud, or writing down what they couldn't say. Some stories will grip you. Stories of heartbreak, resilience, and calls that haunt us long after the line goes quiet. But imagine listening is more than heavy emotion. It's about healing. It's about laughing through the chaos, lifting each other up, and reminding the world that dispatchers are human too. The lighthearted will balance the heavy. Experience the power of storytelling, a podcast for the thin gold line and those who want to understand it. This is Imagine Listening. Your worst day is our everyday. Subscribe now wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.